3 seconds. That's all it takes for your life to end, or for a nightmare to begin. 1 minute, Lindsay Vance was wiping grease off a counter in a dead-end diner, worrying about her rent. The next, she was shielding a child from a hail of bullets, staring down the barrel of a gun held by the most feared man in New York City. But the gun wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was when the smoke cleared and the shivering little girl in her arms looked up at Lindsay, tears streaming down her face, and whispered the one word that would sign Lindsay's death warrant: Mummy. This isn't a fairy tale. This is how a waitress became the queen of the underworld. The smell of stale coffee and burnt bacon was baked into Lindsay Vance's pores. It was 10:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the rain was hammering against the cracked windows of the Rusty Spoon, a dive diner on the edge of Hell's Kitchen that had seen better days in the 80s. Lindsay adjusted her apron, wincing as the coarse fabric rubbed against the bruise on her hip, a souvenir from bumping into the corner of a table during the lunch rush. She was 24, but she felt 50. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands escaping to stick to her damp forehead. "Hey, L order up on table 4. Sal, the owner, barked from the kitchen window. Sal was a good man, but he paid minimum wage and sweated too much. Lindsay grabbed the plate of fries. "Coming, Sal." The diner was mostly empty. Old man Jenkins was nursing his 3rd decaf in the corner, and a couple of college kids were arguing over a textbook. But then the bell above the door jingled, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. It became heavier. A woman walked in, stiff professional, wearing a grey suit that cost more than Lindsay made in a year. Holding her hand was a little girl, maybe 4 years old. The child was dressed like a porcelain doll, a velvet coat, white tights, and patent leather shoes. She looked out of place among the peeling vinyl seats. They sat in a booth near the window. The woman the nanny Lindsay assumed looked nervous. She kept checking her watch. Lindsay walked over, pulling out her notepad. "Evening. Can I get you ladies started with something warm?" The nanny didn't look up. Water, no ice, and a hot chocolate for Sophia. The little girl, Sophia, looked up. Her eyes were impossibly dark, like obsidian, but they were red-rimmed. She looked terrified. She stared at Lindsay, her gaze locking onto Lindsay's face with an intensity that made the waitress pause. "You got it," Lindsay said softly, offering the girl a small, sad smile. "Extra marshmallows." Sophia nodded slowly. Lindsay turned to head back to the counter. That was when she saw the headlights. 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt directly outside the diner, blocking the street. The bright beams cut through the rain and blinded the patrons. Lindsay's stomach dropped. She'd grown up in a rough neighborhood. She knew what a convoy like that meant. "Get down!" Lindsay screamed, dropping the tray. The ceramic plate shattered. The front window exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the diner like diamond dust. The nanny screamed and scrambled backward, abandoning the child in the booth. 2 men in balaclavas vaulted through the broken window, guns raised. They weren't here for the register. They were moving with military precision toward the booth. Sophia. The little girl was frozen, curling into a ball on the vinyl seat, glass shards in her hair. Lindsay didn't think. Instinct, raw and stupid, took over. She lunged across the aisle, sliding over the debris. Just as one of the masked men reached for Sophia's collar, Lindsay tackled the child, pulling her off the seat and dragging her underneath the heavy oak table. "Stay down quiet," Lindsay hissed, pressing the girl's face into her chest. "Grab the girl." "Forget the woman," a voice shouted. It was a jagged, cruel voice. A heavy boot slammed into Lindsay's ribs. She gasped the air, leaving her lungs, but she didn't let go. She curled her body around Sophia, acting as a human shield. "Let go, bitch!" The man grabbed Lindsay's hair, yanking her head back. He pressed the cold muzzle of a pistol against her temple. "Give me the kid, or I paint the wall with your brains." Lindsay looked up, shaking tears stinging her eyes. She tightened her grip on Sophia. "No." The man's finger tightened on the trigger. Lindsay squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the flash. Bang! Warm liquid splattered across Lindsay's face. But she wasn't dead. The weight of the man pulling her hair suddenly vanished. His body hit the floor with a wet thud. The diner went dead silent. Lindsay slowly opened her eyes. Standing in the broken window frame, rain lashing against his tailored black trench coat, was a man who looked like death incarnate. He held a smoking silver hand cannon in his right hand. He stepped inside, crunching over the glass. His face was sharp angles and shadows, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He was beautiful in the way a tiger is beautiful right before it eats you. Lorenzo D'Angelo, the Don of the D'Angelo crime family. Lindsay had seen his face on the news, usually accompanied by words like acquitted and alleged. Lorenzo didn't look at the dead hitman. He didn't look at the shaking patrons. He walked straight to the table where Lindsay was huddled. He crouched down. His eyes were the same dark obsidian as the girl's. "Sophia." His voice was low, a rumble of thunder. The little girl pulled her face away from Lindsay's stained uniform. She looked at her father. Then she looked back at Lindsay. Sophia's tiny hands clutched Lindsay's apron. She buried her face back into Lindsay's neck, sobbing hysterically. "Mummy," Sophia wailed. "Mummy, don't let them take me." The word hung in the air, sharper than the gunshot. Lorenzo froze. His eyes, which had been scanning the room for threats, snapped to Lindsay. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. He took in her blonde hair, the shape of her jaw, the way she was fiercely protecting his daughter. A flash of something unreadable pain recognition ghost crossed his stoic face. "What did she call you?" Lorenzo whispered. Lindsay swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I'm just the waitress. Please, I just wanted to help." Lorenzo stood up, towering over her. He holstered his gun, but the danger didn't dissipate. It intensified. He extended a hand, not to his daughter, but to Lindsay. "Get up," he commanded. It wasn't an offer. Lindsay took his hand. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, Sophia still clinging to her hip like a limpet. Boss, a large man in a suit, ran in from the rain. Lorenzo's right hand, Marco. "The police are 3 minutes out. We need to move. The Russos will send a second wave." Lorenzo nodded. He looked at Lindsay, then at his daughter, who refused to look at him and only held on to the stranger. "She's coming with us," Lorenzo said. Lindsay's heart hammered against her ribs. "What no?" "No, I have to finish my shift. I can't." Lorenzo leaned in his face, inches from hers. She could smell expensive tobacco rain and metallic blood. "You just saved the life of the D'Angelo heiress," he said, his voice cold as ice. "And now she thinks you're her mother. If I leave you here, the Russos will torture you to find out why. You get in the car, Lindsay, or you die on this floor." Lindsay looked at the dead body at her feet. She looked at the terrified child in her arms. She walked out into the rain. The ride was silent. The interior of the armored SUV smelled of leather and sanitizer. Lindsay sat in the back, Sophia asleep on her lap, clutching a handful of Lindsay's shirt. Lorenzo sat opposite them, watching Lindsay with the intensity of a predator, studying a new species. Lindsay tried to make herself small. "Where are we going?" "Safe house," Lorenzo said. He pulled out a phone. "Marco, clean up the diner. Pay the owner double the damages. Make sure the CCTV hard drives are destroyed. And find out who leaked Sophia's location. I want a name by sunrise." He hung up and returned his gaze to Lindsay. "What is your name?" "Lindsay. Lindsay Vance." "Lindsay." He tested the name on his tongue. "Do you know who I am?" "Everyone in New York knows who you are, Mr. D'Angelo." "Lorenzo," he corrected. "Mr. D'Angelo was my father. He's dead. Keep staring at me like that, and you'll join him." Lindsay looked down. Why did she call me that mummy? Lorenzo poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter built into the armrest. His hand shook just slightly. "A crack in the armor. My wife Isabella. She died 3 years ago. In a car accident. Or what the police called an accident." He took a swig of the amber liquid. "You look like her. The hair, the eyes. In the panic, Sophia got confused." "I'm sorry," Lindsay said softly. "Don't be sorry. Be useful." The car slowed as it passed through massive iron gates. They wound up a long driveway lined with ancient oaks. The safe house was a fortress, a sprawling stone mansion in Long Island that looked like it belonged in a Gothic novel. When the car stopped, Lorenzo moved to take Sophia. The moment his hands touched the child, she stirred and screamed, flailing her arms. "No, no, Mummy." She latched onto Lindsay's neck with a death grip. Lorenzo recoiled, hurt, flashing in his eyes before the mask slammed back down. He looked at Lindsay. "Carry her inside. The guest wing, 2nd floor, 3rd door on the left." Lindsay carried the sleeping child through a foyer that was bigger than her entire apartment building. Marble floors, chandeliers, armed guards, standing in the shadows like statues. She laid Sophia down on a bed that looked like a cloud. The room was filled with toys, but it felt cold. Sterile. Lindsay sat on the edge of the bed, stroking the girl's hair until Sophia's breathing evened out. "She hasn't slept through the night in 6 months, a voice said from the doorway. Lindsay jumped. Lorenzo was leaning against the doorframe. He had removed his trench coat. His dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a tattoo of a black cross on his collarbone. "She's terrified," Lindsay said, finding a sudden spark of courage. "You have men with guns everywhere. She's a child, not a soldier." Lorenzo walked into the room. "She is a D'Angelo. In this world, there is no difference." He stopped at the foot of the bed. "I checked your background, Lindsay Vance. While you were in the car, you're 24, college dropout, nursing school." Lindsay stiffened. "My mother got sick. I had to work." She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. You have about 40,000 in medical debt still lingering. You're 3 months behind on rent. And your brother Jack, he owes the Vipers 12 grand for a gambling problem. Lindsay stood up, her face flushing with anger. "How dare you dig into my life? I don't dig. I observe, and I see leverage." Lorenzo reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled something and tore it out, holding it up. $100,000, Lorenzo said. "That covers the debt, the rent, and buys your brother a clean slate." Lindsay stared at the check. It was more money than she had ever seen. "What do you want?" "I need a wife." Lindsay laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You're crazy." "I am pragmatic," Lorenzo countered, stepping closer. "The Russo family attacked tonight because they think I am weak. They think a widower raising a daughter alone is distracted, vulnerable. They want to take my territory." He gestured to the sleeping girl. Sophia needs a mother. She has chosen you. If I marry you, it shows strength, stability. It ends the rumors that I am losing control, and it protects Sophia. The Russos won't touch the Don's wife. It's against the code." "A fake marriage?" Lindsay asked, incredulous. "A contract," Lorenzo corrected. "You play the part. You wear the ring. You attend the galas. You make Sophia feel safe. In return, I clear your debts. I put you up in luxury. And when the war with the Russos is over 1 year, maybe 2, we annul the marriage. You walk away with $1 million. And if I say no," Lorenzo's expression darkened, "then I open the front gate. You walk home. But the Russos know your face now, Lindsay. They know you saved my daughter. To them, you are already involved. Without my protection, you won't last a week, and neither will your brother." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Lindsay looked at Sophia sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. She thought of her brother Jack constantly looking over his shoulder. She thought of the eviction notices piled on her kitchen table. She looked into Lorenzo's dangerous, captivating eyes. "I have conditions," Lindsay said, her voice steady. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening. I'm not just a prop. I get free rein with Sophia, no guards inside the house scaring her. And I want to finish my nursing degree. You pay for it." Lorenzo studied her. A hint of a smirk played on his lips. "You have fire. Good. You'll need it." He held out his hand again. "Deal." Lindsay hesitated. Taking his hand meant selling her soul to the devil. But looking at the check and the sleeping girl, she realized she had already sold it the moment she dove over that diner booth. She gripped his hand. His skin was rough, calloused. "Deal," she whispered. "Good," Lorenzo said, pulling her slightly closer, invading her space. "Pack your things, Mrs. D'Angelo. The engagement party is Saturday, and you have a lot to learn about being a mob wife." The D'Angelo estate was not a home. It was a museum where you couldn't touch the exhibits. Lindsay's first 3 days were a blur of disorientation. She was moved from the guest wing to the master suite, though Lorenzo made it clear he would be sleeping in his study down the hall. "Appearances, Lindsay," he had said, tossing a set of keys onto the velvet duvet. "The staff talks. If they think we aren't sharing a bed, the Russos will know by lunchtime." The transformation began on Thursday morning. Lindsay was sitting in the massive kitchen drinking coffee and trying to ignore the way the chefs stared at her when a woman clicked into the room on 6-inch stilettos. Bianca. She was tall, brunette, and stunning in a way that made your teeth ache. She was the estate manager, but she walked like she owned the deed. Rumor among the maids who Lindsay had befriended was that Bianca had been warming Lorenzo's bed since his wife died, waiting for a ring that never came. "So," Bianca sneered, looking Lindsay up and down, "you're the stray cat Lorenzo dragged in." Lindsay set her mug down. "I'm Lindsay, his fiancée." Bianca laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Fiancée, please, you're a waitress from Hell's Kitchen. You smell like grease and desperation. Lorenzo is doing this for the girl. Once Sophia gets bored of her new toy, you'll be back scrubbing tables." Bianca snapped her fingers. 2 assistants rushed in with racks of clothing. "Lorenzo ordered a new wardrobe. Nothing you own is suitable for the future, Mrs. D'Angelo. Strip." "Excuse me." Lindsay stood up. "We need to fit the dress for the engagement gala, unless you want to look like a potato sack next to the Don. Strip." Lindsay felt the heat rising in her cheeks. She looked at the assistants who looked away. She took a deep breath. She wasn't going to let this woman break her. Throughout the fitting, Bianca was ruthless. She poked, prodded, and made snide comments about Lindsay's peasant hips and cheap scars. Ouch! Lindsay flinched as Bianca accidentally pricked her with a pin for the third time. "Hold still," Bianca hissed. "God, you're clumsy. No wonder you dropped out of nursing school. Couldn't handle the pressure." Lindsay grabbed Bianca's wrist, hard. The room went silent. "I dropped out to pay for my mother's chemotherapy," Lindsay said, her voice low and dangerous. "And I know the difference between an accident and an assault. Prick me one more time, Bianca, and I'll show you what a girl from Hell's Kitchen does when she's cornered." Bianca's eyes widened. She yanked her hand back. "Is there a problem?" Lorenzo was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a charcoal suit, looking impeccable and terrifying. He walked into the room, the temperature seeming to drop 10 degrees. Bianca immediately softened her voice, turning into dripping honey. "Lorenzo, no, of course not. We were just adjusting the hem. Lindsay is just a bit sensitive." Lorenzo ignored Bianca. He walked straight to Lindsay, who was standing there in a half-pinned emerald green gown. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. The touch sent a jolt of electricity down Lindsay's spine. "Does the dress fit?" he asked, staring into her eyes. "It's fine," Lindsay managed to say. Lorenzo turned to Bianca. His face was a mask of stone. "Bianca, you are dismissed. Leave the dress. Lindsay can dress herself." "But Lorenzo, the gala is—" "Get out." Bianca flushed a deep crimson. She shot a look of pure hatred at Lindsay before storming out her heels, clicking furiously on the marble. When they were alone, Lorenzo sighed. "She's jealous. I should have fired her." "Why didn't you?" Lindsay asked. "Because she's efficient, and she's loyal to the family if not to you." Lorenzo stepped back, looking at her in the green dress. For a second, his guard dropped. He looked impressed. "You look beautiful, Lindsay. Dangerous. Is that a compliment in your world?" "It's the highest compliment," he replied. "Sophia is asking for you. She won't eat her lunch." Lindsay changed quickly and went to Sophia's room. The little girl was sitting under a fort made of blankets, refusing to come out for the nanny. "Hey, sweetie," Lindsay whispered, crawling into the fort. "I heard we're having a hunger strike." Sophia looked up, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Is the bad man gone?" "Which bad man? The one with the loud voice?" Lindsay realized she meant the hitman from the diner. The trauma was deep. "He's gone forever," Lindsay promised. "And look," she rolled up her sleeve to show her bicep. "I'm here now, and I'm super tough. I carry 5 plates of pancakes at once. No one messes with me." Sophia giggled. It was a tiny, fragile sound, but it was the most beautiful thing Lindsay had heard in days. "Will you stay?" Sophia whispered. "Until I fall asleep." "I'm not going anywhere," Lindsay promised. That night a thunderstorm rolled over Long Island. Lindsay was in the kitchen getting water when she heard a scream. She dropped the glass and ran up the stairs. The sound was coming from Sophia's room. Lindsay burst in. Sophia was thrashing in her bed, caught in a night terror. "No, Mummy. No." Lindsay didn't hesitate. She scooped the child up, rocking her back and forth. "Shh, shh. I've got you. You're safe. I've got you." Sophia woke up sobbing, clinging to Lindsay. Lindsay began to hum a soft Italian lullaby her own mother used to sing. She didn't know all the words, but the melody was soothing. Slowly, Sophia's sobs turned into hiccups, then rhythmic breathing. She fell asleep with her head on Lindsay's shoulder. Lindsay looked up and gasped. Lorenzo was sitting in the armchair in the corner of the room, submerged in the shadows. He was watching them. He held a glass of whiskey untouched. "You know that song?" he said, his voice ragged. "My mother sang it," Lindsay whispered, afraid to wake the child. "So did mine," Lorenzo said. He stood up and walked over. He looked down at his daughter, then at Lindsay. The harsh lines of his face softened. He looked exhausted. He looked human. "Thank you," he said. "She's a sweet girl, Lorenzo. She just needs love, not guards." "I know," he admitted, "but love is a weakness. The moment you love something, they can use it against you. That's a lonely way to live. It's the only way to stay alive." Lorenzo reached out his hand, hovering over Lindsay's shoulder, almost touching her. The tension in the room shifted from fear to something else, something magnetic. He pulled his hand back at the last second. "Go to bed, Lindsay. Tomorrow is the gala. The wolves are coming to dinner, and you need to be ready to smile while they try to tear your throat out." The D'Angelo ballroom was a sea of black tuxedos, diamonds, and hidden weapons. The engagement party was the event of the season for the New York underworld. Everyone was there, the heads of the 5 families, corrupt politicians, judges on the payroll. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ozone. Lindsay stood at the top of the grand staircase, her arm linked through Lorenzo's. She wore the emerald dress, her blonde hair cascading in waves down her back. A diamond necklace worth more than the entire Rusty Spoon diner rested cold against her collarbone. "Breathe," Lorenzo murmured in her ear. His hand was warm and firm on her lower back. "If they smell fear, they attack. Look them in the eye. You are the queen tonight." "I feel like the sacrificial lamb," Lindsay muttered. "Same thing," Lorenzo quipped. They descended the stairs. All eyes turned to them. The murmurs stopped. Lindsay felt the weight of hundreds of judgments. "Is that the waitress, the gold digger?" The replacement, Lorenzo, led her into the crowd, introducing her to men with names like Jimmy the Hammer and Silent Paul. Lindsay played her part perfectly. She smiled. She laughed at their unfunny jokes. She accepted their congratulations. But she kept her waitress instincts sharp. She watched the room not as a guest, but as a server. She noticed who was drinking too much, who was whispering in corners, who was watching the exits. "Well, well," a oily voice slid through the crowd. The crowd parted. A short, thick man with a face like a bulldog stepped forward. He was flanked by 2 bodyguards who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast. Luca Russo, the head of the rival family, the man who ordered the hit on the diner. Lindsay's blood ran cold. She felt Lorenzo's muscles tense under his suit jacket. "Lorenzo!" Luca smiled, revealing yellow teeth. "And this must be the lucky lady. A Cinderella story, isn't it? From serving burgers to serving the Don." "Careful, Luca," Lorenzo said, his voice pleasant, but his eyes deadly. "You're drinking my wine. Don't spill it." Luca stepped closer to Lindsay. He took her hand and kissed it. His lips were wet. Lindsay wanted to vomit. "Charmed, my dear," Luca whispered. "You have beautiful eyes, just like the first Mrs. D'Angelo. Shame about her breaks, wasn't it? It was a blatant threat, a confession." Lorenzo took a step forward, his hand twitching toward his hip, but Lindsay squeezed his arm. "Don't," she signaled with her eyes. "Not here. That's what he wants." Lorenzo stopped. He exhaled slowly. "Enjoy the party, Luca, while you can." As Luca walked away laughing, the orchestra struck up a tango. "Dance with me," Lorenzo commanded. He pulled Lindsay onto the floor. The music was sharp staccato. Lorenzo moved with surprising grace. He led her through the complex steps, their bodies moving as one. "He killed your wife," Lindsay whispered as he dipped her. "Yes," Lorenzo replied, pulling her back up, his chest pressed against hers. "And tonight I will burn his emir to the ground. But first we dance." For a moment, Lindsay forgot the danger. She forgot the contract. There was only the heat of Lorenzo's hand, the intensity of his gaze, the way he held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. She realized with a start that she wasn't pretending anymore. She felt safe in the arms of a monster. The music ended. The room erupted in applause. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne flutes. "For the happy couple," he mumbled, keeping his head down. Lorenzo reached for a glass. Lindsay reached for hers. She paused. She looked at the glass. The bubbles were rising differently, sluggish, and there was a faint, bitter smell like almonds cutting through the fruitiness of the wine. She looked at the waiter. He was sweating. His shoes were scuffed cheap sneakers, not the dress shoes the staff were issued. She had seen the staff uniforms earlier. They all wore patent leather. Lorenzo raised the glass to his lips. "To us." "No!" Lindsay slapped the glass out of Lorenzo's hand. The crystal shattered on the marble floor. The liquid hissed as it touched the stone. The music stopped. The room gasped. "Lindsay, what?" Lorenzo started angry. "Cyanide," Lindsay yelled, pointing at the puddle. "It smells like almonds, and look at his shoes." She pointed at the waiter. The waiter's eyes went wide. He didn't wait. He pulled a serrated steak knife from his waistband and lunged at Lindsay. "You bitch!" Lorenzo moved faster than humanly possible. He stepped in front of Lindsay, catching the waiter's wrist in midair. There was a sickening crack as Lorenzo broke the man's arm. The knife clattered to the floor. Lorenzo didn't stop. He drove his fist into the assassin's throat. The man collapsed, gasping for air. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed. Guns were drawn. Marco and the D'Angelo security team flooded the room. Lorenzo stood over the assassin, his chest heaving. He looked at the shattered glass, then at the man writhing on the floor, then at Lindsay. He grabbed her face in his hands, checking her for injuries. "Did he touch you? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Lindsay breathed, shaking. I recognized the smell." Lorenzo looked at her with a mixture of awe and fury. "You just saved my life." He turned to the room. He pulled his own gun, a silver Desert Eagle, and fired a single shot into the ceiling. Silence fell. "Someone here!" Lorenzo roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Let an assassin into my home, into my engagement party." He turned his gaze slowly to the corner where Luca Russo was standing. Luca looked pale. The smirk was gone. "I know who sent him," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "And I promise you this. Tonight the streets of New York will run red." He grabbed Lindsay's hand. "Marco, get Sophia. Get the car. We are going to war." As they ran toward the exit, Lindsay looked back. She saw Bianca standing in the shadows of the balcony. She wasn't looking at the chaos. She was looking directly at Lindsay. And she was smiling. The D'Angelo penthouse in Manhattan was less a home and more a high-altitude bunker. Located on the 90th floor, it had bulletproof glass, a private elevator, and a view of the city that looked like a circuit board on fire. For 3 days they had been locked inside. The city below was a war zone. The news reported gas leaks and gang violence in Little Italy and Hell's Kitchen. But Lindsay knew the truth. It was Lorenzo. He was tearing the city apart to find the man who tried to kill them. Lindsay stood by the window watching the police sirens snake through the avenues below. It was 3:00 a.m. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the waiter's knife. "You should be sleeping." Lindsay didn't turn. She knew the sound of Lorenzo's footsteps now. "I can't. Every time I hear a siren, I think it's coming for us." Lorenzo stepped up beside her. He was in his shirt sleeves, gun holster still strapped to his chest. He looked haggard. The stress of the war was carving deeper lines into his face. "We are safe here," Lorenzo said, though he didn't sound convinced. "This building is impenetrable. Marco is downstairs with 20 men. The elevator requires a retina scan." "Someone got into the party, Lorenzo," Lindsay said, turning to face him. "A waiter with a knife. He had a uniform. He knew the schedule. That wasn't just Luca Russo. That was someone inside." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "We are investigating the staff." "It's not the cleaning lady," Lindsay insisted. "It's someone close. Someone who hates me. Or someone who wants you to fail." Lorenzo sighed and ran a hand through his dark hair. "I know. But until I have proof, I cannot execute my own people. That is how empires fall. Paranoia." He looked at her, his dark eyes softening. "You were brave tonight. The way you noticed the shoes. You have good instincts. Better than half my captains." "I was a waitress." Lindsay shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "You learn to read people. The guy who says he forgot his wallet. He never makes eye contact. The couple breaking up, they don't touch their food. That waiter, he moved wrong. He was hunting, not serving." Lorenzo stepped closer. The city light haloed behind him. "I dragged you into this hell, Lindsay. I promised you safety and I gave you a war." "I'm not leaving," she said fiercely. "Sophia needs me. She called me Mummy again yesterday, when the thunder started." At the mention of his daughter, Lorenzo's resolve cracked. He reached out his hand, cupping Lindsay's cheek. His thumb traced her lower lip. "And what about you?" He whispered, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "What do you need?" Lindsay's breath hitched. The air between them crackled with electricity. The fear of death had stripped away the pretense of their contract. There was only this, two people standing on the edge of a cliff. "I need to know that this isn't just a job anymore," Lindsay whispered. Lorenzo didn't answer with words. He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, fueled by adrenaline and the terrifying realization that they might not survive the week. Lindsay wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. For a moment, the Mafia, the guns, and the danger disappeared. There was only the heat of his skin and the beat of his heart against hers. He pulled back, resting his forehead against hers, breathing heavily. This complicates things." "Good," Lindsay said breathlessly. Suddenly the intercom buzzed. "Boss," Marco's voice crackled, tense and urgent. "We found something. You need to come down to the security room. Now." Lorenzo pulled away the mask of the dawn, slamming back into place. "Stay here. Lock the door. Do not open it. For anyone but me." He left. Lindsay touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. But the warmth didn't last long. 10 minutes later, a soft knock came at the door. "Lindsay, it's Bianca." Lindsay froze. "Lorenzo said not to open the door." "I know." Bianca's voice was muffled. "But Sophia, she's sick. She's throwing up. The nanny is panicking. Lorenzo is busy with Marco. I didn't know who else to get. Sophia. Lindsay didn't think. She unlocked the heavy steel door and swung it open. Bianca stood there. She looked perfectly composed. She wasn't panicked, and she wasn't alone. Standing behind Bianca were two men Lindsay recognized from the News Russo enforcers, and holding a gun to the nanny's head down the hallway was a man with a distinct neck tattoo. Bianca, Lindsay breathed, stepping back. What are you doing? Bianca smiled, a cruel, victorious twisting of her red lips. I'm taking back what's mine, you little rat. You're the mole, Lindsay realized, horror washing over her. You let the assassin in. I did, Bianca said, stepping into the penthouse, the men following her. Lorenzo was supposed to die at the party. It would have been tragic. I would have comforted Sophia. I would have run the empire as regent until she came of age. But you had to notice the damn shoes. She signaled the men. Grab her and get the girl. No, Lindsay screamed. She grabbed a heavy vase from the console table and smashed it over the first man's head. He staggered back, blood pouring down his face. Lindsay ran for the bedroom where Sophia was sleeping. Sophia, hide! She made it to the doorway, just as the second man tackled her. They crashed to the floor. Lindsay fought like a wild animal. She bit, she scratched, she kicked. She wasn't fighting for her life. She was fighting for her daughter. Mummy! Sophia screamed, standing in her pajamas, clutching her teddy bear. Run, Sophia! Run to the panic room, Lindsay yelled, pinned under the heavy brute. Bianca walked over to the child. Sophia shrank back, terrified. Don't touch her, Lindsay shrieked, struggling against the man's grip. Bianca knelt down. Hello, sweetie. Daddy is busy. You're coming with Auntie Bianca. No, I want Mummy, Sophia cried, reaching past Bianca toward Lindsay. Bianca's face twisted in rage. She slapped the child hard. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Sophia fell silent, shocked, holding her cheek. Lindsay saw red. A primal surge of adrenaline flooded her veins. She headbutted the man holding her, hearing his nose break. As he recoiled, she scrambled up and lunged at Bianca. But before she could reach her, the butt of a pistol slammed into the back of Lindsay's head. The world exploded in white light, then faded to grey. Lindsay fell to the floor, her vision swimming. Through the ringing in her ears, she saw Bianca dragging a crying Sophia out the door. Mummy, Sophia's voice was fading. Mummy, I'm sorry, Lindsay whispered into the carpet, darkness taking her. I'm sorry. Lindsay woke up to the taste of copper and the sensation of ice water hitting her face. She gasped. Sitting up, her head throbbing with a pain so intense it nearly blinded her. She was still in the penthouse. The beautiful living room was trashed. The vase she had broken lay in shards. Lindsay! Lorenzo was there. He was on his knees beside her, his face pale, his eyes wild with a fear she had never seen before. Marco and the security team were swarming the room. Sophia! Lindsay choked out, grabbing Lorenzo's lapels. They took her. They took Sophia. Lorenzo froze. The color drained from his face completely. Who took her? Bianca! Lindsay sobbed. It was Bianca. She's with the Russos. She let them in. She hit Sophia Lorenzo. She hit her. Lorenzo let out a roar, a sound of pure animalistic rage that made the seasoned hitmen in the room flinch. He stood up and punched the wall, his fist going straight through the drywall. I will kill her, Lorenzo said, his voice a low, vibrating growl. I will peel the skin from her bones. Boss, Marco interrupted, holding up a tablet. We have a message. It was sent to your encrypted server 1 minute ago. Lorenzo snatched the tablet. Lindsay struggled to her feet, swaying, and looked over his shoulder. It was a video stream. The background was a dark, industrial basement. In the center of the frame, tied to a wooden chair, was Sophia. Her mouth was taped shut. She was crying silently, her eyes wide with terror. A bruise was already forming on her small cheek where Bianca had struck her. Standing behind her was Luca Russo holding a lit cigar, and beside him, looking smug and holding a phone, was Bianca. "Hello, Lorenzo." Luca grinned into the camera. "Cute kid. Looks just like you, unfortunately." Lorenzo's grip on the tablet cracked the screen at the edge. "Bianca tells me you've been a very bad boy." Luca continued, blowing smoke towards Sophia. The child flinched. "Trying to wipe out my crew." Tisk, tisk. "Now here is the deal. You want the princess back. You come to the old shipyard in Brooklyn, Warehouse 4, alone. No Marco. No backup. Just you." Bianca leaned into the frame. "And bring the waitress," she sneered. "I have unfinished business with her. If we see one cop or one of your men, the girl dies. You have 1 hour." The screen went black. The room was deathly silent. "It's a trap," Marco said immediately. "Boss, you can't go. It's a kill box. They'll gun you down the second you walk in." "I know," Lorenzo said calmly. He checked the magazine of his gun. "But I have no choice." "I'm coming," Lindsay said. Lorenzo turned to her. "No, you stay here. You're hurt." "She's my daughter too," Lindsay said, her voice shaking but firm. "Maybe not by blood, but she called for me. I promised I wouldn't leave her. And Bianca wants me. If I'm not there, she might take it out on Sophia." Lorenzo looked at the blood matting Lindsay's blonde hair. He looked at the fire in her eyes. He realized then that he couldn't stop her even if he wanted to. She was a mother wolf now. "Okay," Lorenzo nodded. "Marco, get the car. But listen to me carefully." He leaned in to whisper to his lieutenant. "I want snipers on the cranes. I want a team in the water. If I give the signal, you burn that warehouse to the ground. I don't care about the code anymore. Kill them all." The drive to the shipyard was a funeral procession. The rain had started again, washing the grime of the city into the gutters. Lorenzo drove. Lindsay sat in the passenger seat, tearing strips off her dress to bandage her head. "If we don't make it," Lorenzo said, staring at the wet road, "I want you to know. The contract, I was going to tear it up." Lindsay looked at him. "Why?" "Because I don't want a fake wife anymore," he said quietly. "I wanted to ask you for real when this was over." Tears pricked Lindsay's eyes. "You have terrible timing, D'Angelo. It's a family trait." He reached over and took her hand. He didn't let go until they reached the rusty gates of the shipyard. Warehouse 4 loomed ahead, a rotting metal beast in the darkness. A single light bulb flickered above the entrance. "Ready?" Lorenzo asked, pulling his gun. "No," Lindsay said, grabbing a hidden knife she had swiped from the kitchen and strapping it to her thigh under the torn gown. "Let's go." They walked into the warehouse. It was a cavernous space smelling of rust and dead fish. In the center, illuminated by floodlights, sat Sophia. She was still tied to the chair. Surrounding her were 20 armed men. Luca Russo sat on a crate, cleaning his fingernails with a knife. Bianca stood next to Sofia, a gun pressed to the child's temple. "Right on time." Luca laughed. "And you brought the help. How sweet." "Let her go, Luca," Lorenzo's voice echoed. "This is between us. It was—" Luca stood up. "Until you took my territory. Now it's about sending a message." Bianca pressed the gun harder into Sofia's head. Sofia squeezed her eyes shut, whimpering. "Lindsay," Bianca called out. "Come here. Kneel. I want to see you beg." Lindsay stepped forward, her hands raised. "I'm here, Bianca. Let the girl go. She's innocent." "Innocent." Bianca laughed maniacally. "She's the reason Lorenzo never looked at me. For 3 years I raised that brat. I managed his house. I warmed his bed. And he looked right through me. And then you walk in with your cheap apron and your sob story, and suddenly you're the queen." "He didn't love you, Bianca," Lindsay shouted, inching closer. "You can't force love with a gun." "Watch me," Bianca sneered. She cocked the hammer of the gun. "Wait," Lorenzo shouted. "Luca, I'm here. You want my empire. Take it. I'll sign over the deeds, the shipping lanes, everything. Just let my family leave." Luca paused. Greed flickered in his eyes. The D'Angelo empire was worth billions. "Everything. Everything full," Lorenzo said, dropping his gun to the floor. "I concede. You win." Luca smiled. "I win. I like the sound of that." He turned to his men. "Grab him." 2 men rushed Lorenzo, forcing him to his knees and zip-tying his hands. "Now," Luca said, turning to Bianca. "Kill the kid anyway. No loose ends." "No," Lindsay screamed. "With pleasure." Bianca smiled. Time seemed to slow down. Lorenzo was on his knees. Lindsay was 10 feet away. Bianca's finger was tightening on the trigger. Lindsay did the only thing she could. She didn't run at Bianca. She ran at the light. She grabbed a heavy metal chain hanging from a crane hook next to her and swung it with all her might at the floodlight stand. Crash. The massive light shattered. Sparks showered down like fireworks. The warehouse plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the distant street lamps coming through the high windows. "What the?" Bianca shouted, distracted. In that split second of confusion, a shot rang out. But it didn't come from Bianca's gun. It came from the shadows of the rafters. Bianca's shoulder exploded in red mist. She screamed, dropping the gun. Lorenzo had signaled the snipers. "Get down!" Lorenzo roared. Snapping his zip ties, he had weakened the plastic with a hidden razor, a trick he'd learned years ago. He dove for his dropped gun. Lindsay didn't wait. She sprinted through the darkness, sliding across the concrete floor to Sofia. She shielded the child's body with her own as the warehouse erupted into a deafening firefight. Bullets pinged off the metal pillars. Men shouted. But Lindsay only cared about one thing. She ripped the tape off Sofia's mouth. "Mummy," Sofia sobbed, burying her face in Lindsay's chest. "I've got you," Lindsay whispered, tears streaming down her face, cutting the zip ties on Sofia's wrists with her hidden knife. "I've got you." But they weren't safe yet. "Kill them! Kill them all!" Luca screamed from behind a crate. Lindsay looked up. She saw Luca aiming an assault rifle directly at them. Lorenzo was engaged with 3 other men. He couldn't reach them. Lindsay grabbed Sofia and rolled behind a stack of pallets, just as bullets chewed up the concrete where they had been sitting. They were pinned down, and Luca was flanking them. Lindsay looked around. She saw a rusted side door, about 20 feet away. "Sofia," Lindsay said, gripping the girl's shoulders. "Do you see that door?" Sophia nodded, terrified. "When I say go, I want you to run to that door. Don't look back. Don't stop. Uncle Marco is outside." "No, I won't leave you," Sophia cried. "You have to," Lindsay said, kissing her forehead. "Be brave for Mummy." Lindsay stood up. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't a fake wife. She was a mother protecting her child. She grabbed a discarded metal pipe from the floor. "Go!" Lindsay screamed, pushing Sophia toward the door. Sophia ran. Lindsay stepped out from behind the pallets, screaming to draw Luca's fire. "Over here, you coward!" Luca turned his rifle raised. He smiled. "Goodbye, Cinderella." He pulled the trigger. The gunshot didn't sound like a pop. It sounded like a cannon firing inside a tomb. Lindsay felt the impact before the pain, a sledgehammer blow to her left shoulder that spun her around. The metal pipe slipped from her fingers as she collapsed onto the cold, wet concrete. "Lindsay!" Lorenzo's scream tore through his throat, raw and terrifying. Luca Russo lowered his rifle, a sick grin twisting his face as he walked toward Lindsay's prone body. One down, one to go. But he had made a fatal error. He had turned his back on Lorenzo D'Angelo. Lorenzo didn't care about the flying bullets or the other gunmen. He moved with the speed of a demon possessed, vaulting over the crates. He tackled Luca from behind, crashing them both into a pile of rusted oil drums. There was no martial arts technique, no graceful choreography. It was pure, unadulterated rage. Lorenzo rained blows down on Luca's face, shattering bone and cartilage. "You touched her!" Lorenzo roared, his fists flying. "You touched my family!" He didn't stop until Luca Russo stopped moving. The remaining gunmen, seeing their leader destroyed by a man who looked like a vengeful god, threw down their weapons as Marco and the security team stormed the perimeter. Lorenzo skidded to his knees beside Lindsay. She was lying in a pool of blood, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Lindsay!" Lorenzo choked out, pressing his hands over the wound. "Look at me. Open your eyes." Lindsay's eyelids fluttered. "Sophia, she's safe." Lorenzo promised, tears mixing with the blood on his face. "Marco has her. She's safe because of you." "Good," she whispered, her eyes rolling back. "Stay with me," Lorenzo commanded, his voice cracking. "We have a deal, Lindsay. You don't get to break the contract." "I think," she coughed weakly, "I earned my bonus." 3 days later, beep, beep, beep. The rhythmic sound pulled Lindsay from the darkness. She blinked, the white light of the hospital room stinging her eyes. "Mummy's awake." Lindsay turned her head. Sophia was sitting in the chair, pristine, and holding her stuffed rabbit. Sleeping in the chair next to her, looking like he hadn't shaved in days, was Lorenzo. He jolted awake at Sophia's voice. When he saw Lindsay's open eyes, his entire posture collapsed in relief. "Hey," Lindsay croaked. Lorenzo poured her water, holding the straw to her lips. "You terrified me, Lindsay. The doctor said the bullet missed the artery by 2 millimeters. Where is Bianca? Gone." Lorenzo's voice was cold. "She won't hurt anyone ever again." He took a deep breath and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the folded paper, the contract they had signed in the kitchen. "This," Lorenzo said, "is void." Lindsay's heart sank. Of course, the war was over. She was just a tool, and the job was done. "Oh, I understand." Lorenzo ripped the paper in half, then in half again. He let the pieces fall to the floor like snow. "I can't do it, Lindsay," he said, his voice rough. "I can't pretend any more. When I saw you bleeding on that floor, I realized I would burn the world down just to hear you breathe." He reached into his pocket again. This time he pulled out a ring, a vintage sapphire, surrounded by diamonds. "This was my grandmother's. Lindsay Vance, you saved my daughter. You saved my life. I don't want a contract. I want a partner. I want you to finish nursing school, and I want to wake up every morning knowing the bravest woman in New York is mine." He looked at Sophia, who was grinning. "And I think the little one agrees. Please say yes, Mummy." Sophia giggled. "Daddy cries when you sleep." "I do not," Lorenzo protested, blushing. Lindsay looked at the ring, then at the man who had stormed into her diner and changed her life. "I have a condition," Lorenzo smiled. "Name it. No more shooting at dinner, and I pick the honeymoon. Somewhere boring." "Deal," Lorenzo whispered, sliding the ring onto her finger. He leaned down and kissed her. Not a performance, but a vow. "I love you, Lindsay." "I love you too, boss." 6 months later. The sun shone brightly on the lawn of the D'Angelo estate. A long table was set up in the garden, covered in food. Lindsay sat at the head, laughing as her brother Jack manned the grill, now 5 months sober. "Mummy, look!" Sophia ran across the grass, chasing a golden retriever puppy. Lorenzo walked up behind Lindsay, wrapping his arms around her waist. On the table sat a nursing degree diploma. "Happy graduation, Mrs. D'Angelo," he murmured into her hair. "Thank you, Mr. D'Angelo." Lorenzo watched his daughter play. "The Russos are gone. The city is quiet. But this," he gestured to the laughing family, "this is the best deal I ever made." Lindsay touched the sapphire on her finger. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was the queen, and the queen was finally home. And that is how a waitress in a rainy diner became the heart of the most powerful family in New York. Lindsay Vance didn't just save a child. She saved a father from his own darkness, proving that sometimes the strongest soldiers are the ones who fight for love, not power. If you were Lindsay, would you have taken that deal or run for the hills? Let me know in the comments. If you loved this story, please smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss next week's billionaire romance saga. Thanks for watching.